In the 1840s, one family sat down to eat and never finished. Within minutes, a healthy body twisted into violent convulsions, then went still. The death looked sudden, unnatural, and frighteningly deliberate. Rumour moved faster than evidence. Neighbours and officials fixated on a simple idea. This was poison, slipped into ordinary food. It felt possible because the suspected substance was common, cheap, and easy to buy. An inquest followed, but it lacked the tools to catch the truth. The body offered few clear clues, and the suspected poison left almost no obvious trace. Without a reliable test, suspicion filled the gap. As the new century began, poisons stopped looking like a rare, secret weapon. Arsenic, laudanum, and corrosive acids sat in ordinary shops. They sold as rat paste, sleep drops, and cleaning fluids. Anyone could buy them. That change mattered because it erased the old barrier of access. A servant, a spouse, a lodger, a shopkeeper all reached the same shelves. Purchase needed no special story. The most dangerous tools arrived disguised as routine household needs, and it reshaped murder itself. Poisoning no longer required force or noise, only timing and patience. A death could follow a meal or a medicine spoon. The transaction looked innocent, and the crime hid inside everyday commerce. Early in the century, a suspicious death rarely produced certainty. Coroners relied on what they could sense: a bitter taste, a scorched throat, a strange smell. Those crude signs pointed everywhere and nowhere at once. So the courtroom shifted from bodies to stories. Lawyers picked at habits, debts, and private grudges. Neighbours supplied whispers as evidence. A case rose or collapsed on reputation and timing, not on anything a jury could truly see. That weakness changed the crime itself. A poison that left little outward damage became a near-perfect weapon. If doctors could not name it, investigators could not prove it. Invisible poisoning succeeded by turning doubt into an escape route. In 1836, a chemist named James Marsh changed what an accusation could become. His new test did not depend on taste, smell, or opinion. It pulled arsenic out of the body and turned suspicion into a result. For the first time, investigators produced a visible sign that a jury could understand. The autopsy stopped being only a doctor's judgment and became a chemical demonstration. A hidden poison became something that could be shown. That shift rewired the risk of poisoning. Arsenic no longer hid behind doubt and poor methods. A murderer who once counted on confusion now faced measurement and repeatable proof. Getting away with it demanded new choices. Once arsenic became easier to prove, the old certainty of getting away with it faded. So poisoners shifted. They chose substances less familiar to juries and harder for doctors to confirm, agents that could kill quickly yet looked like illness. Strychnine brought sudden spasms that resembled seizures or tetanus. Aconite lowered the heart and blurred the line between poisoning and collapse. Opiate mixtures slowed breathing like a fever or exhaustion. These deaths fit ordinary causes too neatly. Doctors faced a new problem. Suspicion no longer matched proof. Tests lagged behind what criminals used, and post-mortems offered few clear markers. Each new poison forced new methods, and each new method pushed killers to innovate again. In the 1850s, arsenic stopped being only a weapon in a cup. It entered shops as colour. New bright green pigments turned up in wallpaper, dresses, and artificial flowers, and people welcomed them as modern taste. The danger followed the supply chain. Workers who mixed powders and dyed fabric breathed it in and handled it for hours. In homes, the pigment aged, flaked, and dusted. Symptoms appeared slowly: headaches, vomiting, weakness, without a culprit. Families searched for a person to blame, but there was no plot, no bottle, no hand that slipped poison into food. The source was the product itself, sold openly. Poisoning became environmental, built into commerce and spread by fashion. By the late 1860s, poison cases stopped staying local. Newspapers chased them, printed every detail, and turned trials into events people followed like entertainment. Suspicion became a headline, and the courtroom became a public stage. In that spotlight, a new figure carried huge power, the toxicology expert. Some names began to travel from case to case. Their experiments and conclusions sounded like final answers, and juries often treated them that way. But certainty came with a cost. Toxicology started acting like a profession, with reputations to protect and rivals to outshine. The pressure rose to speak plainly, even when the science stayed messy. A verdict could hinge on confidence. In the 1870s and 1880s, suspicious deaths stopped looking like isolated misfortunes. Insurance offices noticed claims that arrived too neatly after short illnesses. Police heard the same story again and again. A quiet home, a sudden decline, then a funeral. Case by case, investigators learned what to compare. The timing of vomiting or convulsions, the way a victim worsened after meals, receipts for rat poison, tonics, or medicine bought in unusual amounts. Patterns turned accidents into questions that demanded answers. And when doubts stayed, the ground sometimes reopened. Exhumations brought bodies back into the investigation, not as a last resort, but as part of a method. Poisoning became recognizable, repeatable, and therefore harder to dismiss as rare bad luck. Near the turn of the century, toxicology stopped being mostly an arsenic story. Laboratories widened their targets to alkaloids like strychnine and morphine, and to metals beyond the usual suspects. Fewer poisons stayed safely unnamed. That change tightened investigations. Chemists compared organs, stains, and residues against longer lists, and they did it with procedures that could be repeated and checked. Suspicion no longer floated on symptoms alone, it could be pinned down. Then the most unsettling shift arrived. Old cases returned, bodies were exhumed, preserved samples were retested, and past testimony was measured against new results. Some convictions collapsed, while supposed natural deaths reappeared as calculated murders. In the early 1900s, poison still solved problems for people who felt trapped, and for people who planned coldly. The ingredients changed less than the motives. What changed was risk. Science narrowed options but never erased doubt. A suspicious death now faced two tests at once, what the body showed and what the records suggested. Doctors needed a clear chemical finding, not a story. Without it, suspicion stayed suspicion, and the law moved on. That gap decided outcomes. Some were executed on strong conclusions. Others walked because proof failed by a fraction. And many cases stayed frozen in paperwork and burial ground, with poisons still present, but questions left sealed forever.